What up, everybody? Colt94 back in with another video. This one is going to be my yearly top 10 games I beat throughout the year. So this will be the 2020 edition of this video. For those of you who haven't seen my yearly top 10s, specifically comes with my gaming content. I don't do top 10 games that have come out this year because I don't normally pick up too many games that come out the recent year, just to save some money, and the fact that I picked up a lot of games for like the PS3, GameCube, and I still collect older consoles. So instead of doing a top 10 games of this year, I do a top 10 games I beat this year. So these games can be from any year, can come out of any time ever. Just they're ones I picked up and played this year, so I'll be counting down those. Before we start, let me know in the comments some of the games you guys played this year. I know there's been a lot of issues trying to get like the newer consoles still, but a lot of people have been getting them. If you've got them, let me know how you're liking them so far, and let me know which games that I don't have for the consoles that could possibly be worth me picking up. So without further ado, let's just get right into the video. Alright, coming at number 10, we have Deathloop. Deathloop's probably concept-wise my favorite on the list that I have this year. The concept of this game is you play as Cole, and he's tasked with ending this re-looping loop of him waking up on the same day at the beach, and then ending the day, and then going back and reliving the same day over and over and over again. The way he realizes he has to deal with this, he has to kill, I think it's 7 or 8 people on the same day in one loop to break the loop going on. The story gets explained a lot deeper, but I'm not going to dive into too much of that for spoilers. The way they integrate Cole and all the other characters, like Juliana specifically, one I can talk about because she's plastered all over the game at the beginning. She is the opposite of you, so she is trying to keep the loop going, and she has her own reasons for that, reasons for interacting with Cole, and they kind of know each other. The gameplay loop basically comes down to, you start day 1, you have 4 time slots, so you have to figure out how to kill everybody in those time slots. You can explore, you level up these certain weapons and guns that you get that you can keep throughout your playthrough as long as you don't die with them on your current day. Then you can take those upgrades, figure out these different quests and how to make slight adjustments that will stay throughout the loops, or make it easier for you to then complete all the assassinations in one go. So you're kind of leading up to doing that final assassination. The one thing I will say that kind of holds this game back, well, there's 2 things. One is the looping system. Although it's an interesting concept, I think they need to do some more to spice it up, because it did get repetitive going back to these same sections that are the exact same way, and I don't know, it felt like it got really, I know it's supposed to get repetitive, but it didn't feel repetitive in a good way getting closer to the end. Mainly because of the main reason why this game's held back a bit on my list is that you can clearly figure out how to set up the day beforehand, but if you don't do the quests in the specific order that they want you to, you won't be able to actually unlock the ending until you complete all the quests leading up to it. Like early on, I think 2 or 3 days before I actually ended up completing the game, I already went through and killed everybody how I should, but since I didn't have the quests to unlock the story to go a little farther, I wasn't able to complete it till 3 days later. So that was kind of annoying and kind of, I don't know, dulled the gameplay a little bit, at least for that end part of my playthrough. But overall, still a solid game, decent combat. It's a first-person shooter stealth game, and still is a lot of fun, with a really unique concept, honestly. Alright, then we have Ghostwire Tokyo. This was one of my most wanted games when the PS5 was announced. Initially, I'm pretty sure this was supposed to be a release title, then got pushed back. So when it finally came out, I bought this one full price because I was waiting for it for a while, so I was pretty excited for this one. So what Ghostwire Tokyo is, it's kind of like a first-person shooter power game. So you have a bunch of different spells and stuff you unlock that you use to fight off these demons. So basically there's a demon invasion in Tokyo. Spoiler reasons I won't say, but you eventually gain powers and the ability to fight these demons. So your character's goal is to figure out who's doing this, where they're doing it, and how to stop it. So your whole gameplay loop is centered around trying to level up yourself, build up your character, gain new powers in order to fight the bosses down the road. What this game does really well is the graphic style, the music, and the design of this game. Is fantastic. It's one of those games that you just want to look around and go to all the subquests and stuff like that, just to see the different type of monsters, different type of demons, experience all the cool sound design stuff they do in this game. It's really a pretty game is how I would describe it. The gameplay is pretty simplistic in that it's just kind of spam the button or hold the button to do a stronger attack. You have different powers that do slightly different things, but it's mainly just shoot the thing in front of you repeatedly so you can break it open, steal the souls from it, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. It can get fun comboing the powers together, but it does get a little repetitive, I would say. I would say the main thing that holds this game back from being higher on my list is it's a big collectathon. So to level up and to gain experience and to upgrade your powers, you need to collect a bunch of souls, and they are scattered all over the map. Like, we're talking thousands of them all over this map, and it would take eons to collect all of them. So I definitely stopped doing that at some point, and it does get a little repetitive. And to even replenish your powers, you don't just replenish them on your own, or after you get in a fight it will slowly replenish. You have to go break open stuff or drain it from certain enemies in order to regain your ammo. It gets a little repetitive in that sense. But overall, I think the general story and the atmosphere of this game were way over the top good to kind of push down that negative stuff that I was talking about. So if you're interested in this game, I would recommend getting it. I would recommend getting it at a discount if you could. I recommend that with any game, but specifically this one. You'll love it for the graphic design and sound design like I did. Just the gameplay might get a little repetitive. Alright, next up we got Spider-Man Miles Morales. I'm not going to spend too much time on this game because this game's pretty short, but it's basically the original Spider-Man game that came out on the PS4. Take that, add Miles Morales. It's the same fighting style, plays like an Arkham game, has stealth mechanics of Arkham as well, and just has the kind of web swinging action and powers oriented in to the Spider-Man universe. I will say the story in this at the start was actually pretty interesting. The initial twist and the initial, like, I'm gonna say half of the game had a pretty interesting story, and I was pretty engaged in it. Then it loses me in the last half, but I will say I don't know if it's slightly better than the first one, but the story was strong, I think, in the beginning. The combat's still really good, web swing feels amazing, and the main thing about these games is it's just a lot of fun. Like, the story is kind of meh, and it's a really short game, but it's super fun to just mess around with. If you need a game to just mess around with, swing around, fight some bad guys and stuff like that, it's a fantastic feeling game, and I think that's why these games are so popular. Is Far Cry 6. I guess that works out. So what Far Cry 6 is, for those of you who haven't heard of the Far Cry games, it's a first-person shooter open world game. Basically, there's a dictator, that guy. He owns this giant region that's kind of like cult-like or evil or corrupted, depending on which Far Cry game you're playing. But this one is specifically a corrupt government. You play as a resistance group that's trying to overthrow it, and you basically go section to section to section to section, clearing out these kind of mini bosses or his corporals or lieutenants, and taking over these areas, slowly getting up to his main area and taking him out. If you're like me and you love the Far Cry formula, this game's great. It doesn't stray away too much from the original Far Cry formula. I think the one thing that has improved with these games is the gunplay. I would say each iteration forward, the ability of the consoles has improved the gunplay and combat a lot, I think, from the like 3 and 4 and stuff like that. The quests are still pretty good. There's some fun side quests sprinkled in. The buddy system's pretty good. There's some unique allies you can get that are fun to mess around with and fun to switch up. The guns are still great to customize, and the weapon feel is still fantastic. It's one of those games that if you love the Far Cry formula, like I do, you'll get a good playthrough out of this. I don't think it's one of the stronger Far Cries. I would still say 3 and 5 are my favorites, but this one's probably somewhere in the middle. Definitely still good through a playthrough, and I enjoyed it. Alright, then we got a pretty interesting one, and that's Wet for the PS3. For those of you who don't know about Wet, it's a Bethesda third-person shooter. It's kind of, how I would describe it, it's kind of like if Quentin Tarantino made a video game, is how I would describe it, and kind of like its art style and delivery. So you play as, oh, I forget her name, the lady on the cover. She's basically a hired killer, like a contract killer, and she gets hired for this contract that basically, or it's very early, gets this guy's killed, who ends up being a boss of a like mafia crime family. And she was betrayed by the original seller of the contract. So basically your whole goal is to get revenge on the seller. And basically what this game goes for is, if you've ever played Max Payne or Red Dead Redemption, that slow-mo mechanic where you can, like in Max Payne, dive, or with John Marston just line up and shoot a bunch of stuff automatically. It goes for that mechanic as its core gameplay mechanic. So basically you'll enter, say, arena of bad guys. You'll want to slide, wall climb, swing on stuff on the ceiling, and all those can enter a slow-mo mode where one of her guns, because she's always dual wielding, will lock onto an enemy and will auto fire, and then you can control the other one, so you can shoot like 4 people at one time and go for these crazy combos. Also has some melee combat with her sword. It's just a fun mix and mash of killing a bunch of people, to be honest. It's hack and slash gameplay mixed with third-person shooting. I will say it's on the harder side of games that I've played recently. It's definitely one of those ones where you have to use the slow motion mechanics sort of methodically and to plan out where you're going with it, especially for certain arena rooms and boss fights, which makes it interesting and fun, honestly. The sound design and music in this game is fantastic. A lot of hard rock and metal, which really shoots the atmosphere of this game. There's some different tone switches with different kind of sections you go through. Like she has a rampage mode where she'll kill somebody and the blood will get on her face, so she gets all pissed off, and she goes in with this like red overlay. It's kind of like bloody rage, and you just go around massacring everybody. It's one of those games that the story just kind of chugs the game along and kind of gives it a reason to go, but you're playing it for the combat. It's just fun. The rooms, you just go in, figure out how to shoot all the people, get all the objectives, and the combat's really solid in this game. I would recommend picking up this game if you're a PSV collector at all. A lot of fun. I think it can be pricey, but I got this for like, I think 20 bucks. So if you can find it for around there, definitely worth it. Alright, coming at number 5 is Resident Evil 7. I am not a huge Resident Evil fan. It's not that I don't like the games, I just never really got into them. I played 5 and 6, a bit of 6. I played all the way through 5. And then when I saw this one switch to first person style and it was more like the original horror style of the games, I really wanted to give this type of game a shot. So I picked up 7, hopped into it, and I really ended up enjoying it. I think the first person combat is more my style, and I think the first person perspective I actually prefer for these games, and I think it's a great change for the series. The place where you're investigating and spending most of your time in, it's really cool, creepy. The puzzles are pretty good. The combat's still got that classic kind of clunky Resident Evil style, but it works for the game. And the boss fights are really fun and unique. I think the one that I'm showing you gameplay wise with Jack, I'm pretty sure his name is, probably my favorite, and probably my favorite character out of the bad guys. This is just a really fun playthrough. I enjoyed the change of pace from my normal games, which are more recently beat 'em up or hack and slash games or really fast paced shooters, to more of a slow methodical shooter where you had to solve puzzles and kind of conserve your ammo and be very careful and explore every inch of the place. It was a nice switch up, and I enjoyed the change of pace. The story is actually pretty good in this game. I enjoyed the characters that were introduced, and I enjoyed figuring out all the different like puzzle pieces and kind of putting together the story of what happened at this desecrated like farmhouse. And overall, if you're into horror games and haven't picked this up yet and given it a shot, I would highly recommend it actually, and I'm looking to get into Village this year, hopefully. Alright, the next up, coming at number 4, we got SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated. For those of you who don't know about these games, I actually put this game on my top 100 games of all time, the original and this kind of combined. And the reason why it's not higher on this list, even though it's on my top 100 games of all time, is this is a remaster of an older game that came out I'm going to say the Xbox and PS2 era. And basically is a third-person adventure platformer game, kind of set up like the Jack and Daxter games or the Banjo-Kazooie games, but in the SpongeBob universe. So it's a giant kind of collect-a-thon. You do little puzzle quests or little boss fights with either playing as SpongeBob, Patrick, or Sandy, and you go around collecting golden spatulas and socks and shiny objects, trying to complete and collect all the spatulas in order to unlock the next area, do the next boss fight, rinse, repeat, till you get to the end of the game. What I really enjoy about these games is it nails the kind of atmosphere that a SpongeBob game should go for. The comedy and delivery is right on point with the show. It doesn't look exactly one-to-one to the show, but the feeling of the characters, the atmosphere, and the kind of general feel of a SpongeBob show is definitely nailed in these games. The platform mechanics are good. The puzzles are kind of kid-friendly. They're pretty easy, but they're still interesting enough with the gameplay mechanics to have a fun time doing them. This is just a classic replay for me of an original game I beat a while ago. So I really enjoyed that this is a true remaster. It kept the original feel of the games and basically feels like a one-for-one just HD upgrade of it, which I really enjoy. So if you've never played the original or haven't played this one at all, I would really recommend playing these ones. It's just a fun little playthrough, and if you're into platinums at all, it's a pretty easy platinum. Alright, top 3 time, we have Lost Judgment. For those of you who don't know about these games, the Judgment series is made by the same people that made the Fist of the North Star series and the Yakuza series. So if you've played specifically Yakuza, you'll know how these games will function. So basically it is a open world, third-person beat-em-up game that you play as Yagami. He's a ex-lawyer who's now a detective and runs a detective agency. Specifically in this one, this is the second game out of 2. So this is a continuation of the first game. The combat in these games are fantastic. If you know the Yakuza games and you know how smooth and fun their combat is, this is the same style, but it has its own unique styles, specifically for Yagami in his kind of combat styles. The story in these games are great. It goes for more of a good guy take on Kamurocho and the kind of Yakuza scene where you're playing as a detective trying to unravel a string of murders. So it kind of has those detective investigation gameplay sections mixed in with the fighting sections, so you get a good blend, and it's a good change up from if you play the Yakuza series or the Fist of the North Star series. It has its own unique flair to it. It still has the same thing where the main story is really serious and really engaging, and then the sub stories are these over the top, super goofy but really funny storylines that kind of just go out in left and right field and all over the place. What they do well in these games, specifically this one, is they have a kind of school element to it, where in order to investigate where you're investigating, you become a school advisor for a detective club in I think it's a elementary school or a high school. Like, it's a high school. But while you're there, you also investigate a bunch of the clubs in the school. So there's a bunch of mini games associated. So there's like the boxing club where you learn to box and go up the boxing ranks. There's a photography club, there's a skateboarding group, there's a biker gang. So you go through all these different clubs. They have their own little interesting sub-story. You play their own unique minigame, level up to the thing, beat the sub-story, get some rewards, and then figure out this other subplot, this giant subplot, which is kind of the second main story on the side. So there's a ton of content in these games. I would highly recommend getting into these series if you enjoyed the Yakuza series at all, or weren't really interested in the content in those games, but wanted to dive into one of them. I would recommend the Judgment series. Definitely start off with the first game so you get the entire story. But these games are fantastic to play through, and I think they're kind of overlooked, to be honest. Alright, next up we have Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. For those of you who don't know about the Ratchet & Clank series, it's one of the main staple series on the PlayStation. It's a third-person shooter, beat-em-up game, kind of follows the formula of a Jack and Daxter game, I would say. More so the style of the second and third games. And what I enjoy so much about my playthrough of these games is the combat feels amazing. There's so many different guns that do a variety of different stuff. You get to upgrade them. There's these huge upgrade trees for all these different weapons. And it's fun to mix and match them and create these combos with them. The combat feels great. The story is actually pretty good in this game. I enjoyed the mechanic of having the two different Lombaxes that you kind of switch back and forth with, and they have kind of their own unique perspectives of what's going on. And I like the clashing of the multiverses in this. It's, I think, an interesting concept. And while the story is pretty good and carries the game along pretty well, and you're decently interested in through it, the combat where this game shines. It feels so smooth. I think this is one of the series that the upgrading in consoles continuous, the hardware getting better and better, has really benefited these games. The combat feels so smooth. The gunplay is fantastic. The frame rate stays consistent, and the boss fights and different arenas you can go into are just so much fun to mess around in. The rail mechanics and gravity mechanics, kind of used for the platforming, feel smoother than ever, and it's just one of those games that if you're a PlayStation fan, you really enjoy these games, and these are a must-have on any PlayStation owner's list. The animations and the cutscenes, they look fantastic. They're almost to the level where they look like a kind of Disney or Pixar animation, and they're constantly getting better, and it's awesome to see and watch and play through. This game definitely shows off the graphical powers that the PS5 has. Overall, highly recommend this game. I think coming in at number 1, my favorite game I played through this year is Judgment. So as you heard, I talked about Lost Judgment number 3. So everything I said core-wise about Lost Judgment in terms of the gameplay loop, the same thing as the Yakuza franchise, where the original story and main story is very serious and kind of super interesting, and then you have these over-the-top wacky sub-stories on the side, is all the same and true. First thing is, I think the sub-stories and sub-quests in this game are a lot better and well done. I think there's the main story, and then there's a sub, like, kind of main story. I think this one's a lot more interesting in this game. Although I like the school mechanics of the second one, some of the mini games are very frustrating to play through. So they kind of spoil, if you don't like a certain mini game, it can kind of spoil that whole section for you. In this one, it's all basically centered around the main detective style and combat style that Yakami has. I think the stories are pretty comparable in terms of how good they are. I think it just depends on which one you find more interesting. And one thing this game does really cool, which is unique to any of the Yakuza games or any of the games done by this publisher that I know of, is they do friendship things. So basically a bunch of people, like store owners, people you could do little sub quests for, or just random people on the streets, you could end up doing stuff for them that levels up your friendship. So in order to unlock different quests or become more known throughout the city, you have to get more friendship hearts with more people in the city. So eventually you go around like collecting a bunch, and these are your ways of upgrading and getting new sub stories, while also gaining combat bonuses. So say you get friendship with a store owner, if you fight near the store, you can get these EX moves where he like throws you a super hot like kebab or something like that, and you end up like throwing it in a dude's face, or throws you a pan and you slap the dude in the face with the pan. Like, it gives you these little fun combat mechanics to it. Also, you can end up having NPCs that just walk around, that if they're in the area when you're fighting, will just join in and help you fight. And overall, the difference between this game and the second game are very minimal. It just comes down to your personal preference. I just prefer the first one a little more. If you love any of the games in the Yakuza series, or kind of iffy on them, you like the combat but didn't really like the story direction or characters or the overarching story tones, you may like this one because it mixes the detective kind of mystery solving aspects and have gameplay elements of that with the fighting styles of Yakuza and kind of that same combat style. So it's a good mix, and really I think the story in these games are a notch above the Yakuza franchise in my opinion, like the main story. And so for a good reason, this gets the number 1 on my top 10 games of 2022. Alright, so there we have it. That is my top 10 games of 2022 I beat. I know there wasn't a lot of variety in terms of consoles, a lot of PS5 games, one PS4 and one PS3 game in there. This year, 2020-23, I'm focusing on PS3 games and PS5 games. Those will be my main focus. I really want to get back into collecting more for the PS3, because with the prices of games right now, I really need to get an itch for retro games or older games, just because I can pick up, I went to a store recently, I picked up a stack of games like this for $70, where that would get me not even a full priced game for the PS5. So I'm picking up a couple games this year that I'm really interested for the PS5, like Hogwarts Legacy, Street Fighter, and a couple others. But other than that, I'm going to be mainly focusing on the PS3, so look forward to that for my next year one. And as I said at the beginning of the video, let me know some of the games you played through recently, if you like some of the choices I made this year from what I've chose to play. As always, thanks for watching. Happy New Year's. Hope you guys have a great 2023. I remember, everybody has some nerdiness at their core.